I'm going to paint this picture in the style of John Singer Sargent. Hi everyone, Steve Elliott here again. Today I'm painting in the style of John Singer Sargent, an American painter born in 1856 and died in 1925. I've chosen this one because after last week's brain fry of the flower painting, which really was a mammoth project for me, I needed something that I thought would be a little bit easier on me. And I have been a big fan of John Sargent for a long while, and I suppose he has definitely influenced my work over the years. So I'm sort of halfway there with this one. I paint similar to this anyway. I like the loose, broad strokes, so I thought I would have a go at this. Now, this is a photograph of my dad. He's 86 now, and he is a hard man. And by that, I don't mean he's a fighter or anything like that. I've never known him you know, sort of have a scuffle or get in any trouble or anything. But he has got the highest pain threshold of anybody I've ever met. And many years ago, our family, and by that I mean my dad, two of his brothers, and myself and my brother, all worked as painters and decorators, as house painters. And my dad used to clean his hands at the end of the day with paint stripper, which I don't know how he did not end up with dermatitis. And another time he was running for a bus and fell over and broke his ankle, but instead of going to the doctors, he went home and dug a hole and planted a plant that he'd bought from the garden centre before he went to the doctors. So that's the kind of person he is. So I kind of admire him for that, even though he just moans all the time and drives me crazy. But I love him to bits. So I thought I'd do this one with my dad, and in the style of John Sargent. So John Sargent was a leading portrait painter of his generation, and in his time he painted 900 oil paintings and 2,000 watercolours, which is a absolutely mammoth achievement, really. And he was an acclaimed portrait painter. He was very successful in his own lifetime. He has been described as probably the best portrait painter of all time, and he is an American, or he was an American, but he was actually born in Florence because his mum and dad were a bit nomadic, I suppose. They moved around Europe a lot, moving from place to place. So because of that, he didn't have a sort of a conventional schooling. He didn't go to traditional schools. He was homeschooled, and his mum used to encourage him by giving him sketchbooks and suggesting that he go on drawing excursions. And he spent lots of time copying pictures of ships from magazines and drawing detailed landscapes and things. And his dad kind of hoped that he would be follow a career in the Navy, but obviously he didn't. And at 13, his mum realised that he was actually quite good at art, and although he was also a competent musician as well, and but she gave him or sent him paid for watercolour lessons for him. But by the time he was 17, he was accomplished in art, music and literature, and he was fluent in French, German and Italian. So clearly his homeschooling didn't really hold him back much. And at 18, he passed an entry exam to the École des Beaux-Arts. I think I pronounced that right, which is a premier art school in France, or was in that time. and there he studied anatomy and perspective. And in his early years, he did prefer landscapes. He produced a lot more landscapes than he did portraits, but it was difficult to find commissions, so it was easier to launch a career as a portrait painter. So that is the way he went, and he did become a portrait painter. And his first major portrait was of his friend Banny Watts, which in 1877, he was only 21 years old, was his first salon admission. That's the French salon, I guess. And that was accepted. And his second was an impressionist piece called The Oyster Gatherers of Concal, which is totally different to the portrait. The portrait is very conventional, sort of salon work. And yet the stuff he did for himself was much more impressionist and freer, and really, I guess to me, more exciting. And at the age of 23, he's still only 23 years old, he took on several portraits and portrait commissions, and that was the start of his career, which he was set for the next 25 years. Painting portraits and doing roughly 14 a year. 14 portraits, that's more than one a month. And the work in some of them is absolutely phenomenal. So let's talk about the painting a bit. I really like, I pretty much used the turpentine brush for this one, again, because I've sort of crashed in a rough background, and the turpentine brush, I love the sort of the way you get the bristles in the brush strokes, which seem to me to emulate his brush strokes perfectly. So that's what I went with. But on the face, he does go for more detail. So then I changed to the acrylic brush, and I was using that much more. I did stick to his palette pretty much, and I changed the colour of the shirt subtly, not massively, but much more to reflect the colours that he was using, and it gave me a much more balanced painting anyway, because that is something you've got to watch. If you try and paint a picture with the colours that are actually in the scene before you, there's no reason to suggest that some of the colours aren't going to clash and not be balanced. But by using the colours, if you're observant, if you sort of look close at the beginning of every single one of these videos, I load the painting of the artist, like in this case, John Sargent, into Procreate, and I do a colour sample. So I create a palette of their colours, and I'm building up quite a nice selection of palettes of different artists, and I try and stick as much as I can within that palette, and then you get a much more harmonious painting, I think. And so that's what I've done here. I've stuck pretty much religiously with the colours that are in the painting. In fact, at one point, I tend to use blue quite often in skin tones, and I tried that on this, and I thought, no, it's not going to work. It's not working. It's just not the style that, or it's not in the colour scheme that he's using. So it didn't take me long. I very quickly worked out that had to go, and I didn't like it, so I painted that out. So anyway, back to John Singer Sargent. Although he was American, he spent most of his earlier years in Europe, and he studied in France, and he had a salon in France, and then he moved to London, where he moved his studio there. and he was a very well-known painter, very successful. He was actually so successful he could charge high rates and also be very picky about who he painted. So if he didn't think somebody was suitable for a portrait, he wouldn't paint their picture. He did go to New York though, and he painted lots of commissions there, including 2 commissions for presidents of America, and he painted lots of people that were considered to be the leading lights in society, both in America and in Britain. So he was a very popular painter, and he moved in the highest circles. But he was also a very accomplished musician as well, and he supported musicians and performers of the day. By the time he was 51 though, he'd had enough of painting portraits, and he actually closed his studio. And he said painting a portrait would be quite amusing if one were not forced to talk while painting. So I guess it would be talking to the sitter and trying to entertain them and amuse them. And I guess that would get you down after a little bit. Because I wouldn't be definitely not very good if I was trying to paint and having to talk as well. I spend most of my time painting on my own, very solitary, nobody about, and that's how I like it. I don't think I could cope very well if I was having to talk to somebody. And if anybody comes visiting me and I'm painting, I do stop. I stop. I don't continue painting. But that's really so I'm not being rude. You wouldn't want to be rude, would you really? Anyway, he did continue to paint, but at that point he concentrated mainly on landscapes, and he painted outdoors a lot in the style of the Impressionists. But he wasn't really considered an Impressionist. And unfortunately, he died of heart disease at the grand old age of, I think it was 71. You can work that out from the dates I've told you, I guess. But anyway, he got into his 70s, which I suppose that's not a grand old age at all, is it really? That's still quite young, I guess, in today's standards. Anyway, I've really enjoyed painting this one. I did a big painting. This was another huge one, 36 inches by 24, because it's my dad. I thought I might get one printed out of this, so I wanted to do it a large format. So I could only work with a maximum of 4 layers, and I pretty much used 1 layer for the whole of the painting, one for the background, which I put on first, and then I kind of work over that. So then I have a second layer, which is like the main painting. And then you probably notice on the seat, I put a brown glaze on that. So I set the blend mode to multiply before I started painting that. And then once I'm happy adjusting that, I then flatten that layer down. And I did that because I was looking at the original painting and I thought, I like that dark brown he's got, or that sort of, not dark, vibrant red brown that he's got on the furniture behind Robert Louis Stevenson. That's the person in the painting. And I wanted that in the settee or the chair that my dad's sitting on. Also, although it wasn't that colour, that's the colour I wanted to make the picture seem a lot richer and give it more depth. So there we go. I'm signing that one, and I guess I will probably, my vanity made me slow that down. I just slowed the video down so you can see that in real time, see me signing it. I thought that'd be quite fun. So that means I'm still not quite finished, and I'm going to do a little bit more. Notice I do knock the opacity back though, because I don't want the signature to be glaring out. I want it to be quite subtle. So obviously this is a very personal painting to me, and I really enjoyed doing it. I think I caught a likeness of him pretty early on. I don't know if that's because I've seen so much of him or what, but it didn't seem to be too much of a problem. But that is it. I hope you have enjoyed this painting. If you have, please give me a thumbs up. It's much appreciated, helps me out a lot. And if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell, because I have lots of videos like this and I would love to be sharing them with you. So hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Bye.